Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll go through this a little bit quick because I think we've already gone over time, but I'm just going to show a trial that we did, or a couple trials actually, trying to work out some nitrogen management guidelines for a few Asian vegetable crops in Florida. I'm a biological scientist in Dr. Liu's lab. So a lot of this Dr. Liu already talked about, but basically we're interested in these crops because a lot of growers need to replace citrus and potato acreage. It's declining and they seem to be high value. They've got a lot of potential. And our goal was to determine some sort of nitrogen rate to help growers who are adopting them make better fertilizer management decisions. And so the way we grew these, all the crops were grown with plastic mulch, irrigated 100% via drip, including germination and transplanting where applicable. And the fertilizer was injected through separate drip lines. And I should clarify real quick, the 2017 and 2018 trial here was done by the previous biological scientist, Mohammed Shahid. They used a slightly different set of fertilizer rates. They started at 50 pounds per acre, plus a control, 100 pounds and 150 pounds per acre. And the plants were trained to climb up a trellis. You saw some pictures of it in Dr. Liu's presentation, and I'll show some more here just so we can see what it looks like. And then they harvested every 5 days once fruit appeared. We did it basically the same way. The only difference was we started at 100 pounds nitrogen per acre, 150, 200 pounds per acre. And the three crops that we grew in both of these trials were long bean, Luffa, and bitter melon. So this is what the field looked like mid-season, basically. You can see this kind of trellis on the right. It's like a mesh, and we just train the vines to climb up that, and eventually they go over the top. This trellis system, it worked for this, but if you're going to do a larger production, you need something a little bit sturdier and probably higher as well. You can see some of these posts in the back are actually bending. But this is a long bean on the left, Luffa on the right, and the bitter melon. You can't see it in this picture, but we'll take a look at some later. But this is what the field looked like. And this weird line coming down the middle is just where we spliced in the different fertilizer rates into a drip line that was dedicated solely for that. All the varieties we used came from Tynong Seed. They're a specialist seed company that might be owned by a larger seed company in Florida, but they just specialize in these Asian vegetable crops. That's Luffa, long bean variety, and the bitter melon. And this is what a mature bitter melon looks like. This is the variety we use. So it's this rough green variety. So the fertilizer program for 2017 and 18, we already looked at the rates. They used liquid 808. I couldn't find more details on who supplied that or what company provided that material. I'd like to know, but I didn't have time to prepare it for this. And then when I did this, I used can 17 for nitrogen. And then we applied the same rate of potassium across all treatments through the same drip line. Well, through a separate drip line dedicated to potassium, because we wanted to have the same rate of potassium applied to all plots, basically. And this is what my schedule looked like. So it was over 11 weeks, and we kind of scaled it up to try and meet crop demand at the peak in the middle of the season, and then tapered. So Luffa, this is an example of what our harvest looked like, the crop. This is 2017 and 18 data. So they started from 0 to 150, and they saw this really strong effect. This is yield per acre. All these were significant. We didn't quite see the same thing in 2020. Our peak yield is a little bit lower, and there was a significant difference in 2020 between the 200-pound rate and the control, not between 100 and 150. So maybe there's some benefit to the higher rate, but I wouldn't be too confident. In 2021, we didn't see a significant difference. That was numerically higher average for the 200-pound treatment, but I think probably there is an appropriate N rate, higher than 0, but it's not super clear what it would be exactly, in my opinion. So we saw that 200-pound rate higher than the control in 2020. All treatments in the 17 and 18 trial were significantly higher, kind of ascending, but wasn't as clear for us. Long bean. So here's a little bit better photo of the long bean climbing up the side here, hanging down. They saw the same thing. It kind of, in 2018, they didn't have a significant difference between the 100 and the 150. There was between B and C, or a difference in 50, 0. And then they saw, the same ascending thing in 2017. We had a really bad year. We had some disease problems in 2020, but we did see a significant difference in 150 pounds per acre. But, it's kind of hard to say how reliable that effect is in it, when most of the crop got wiped out. But we had a really good year last year, but we didn't see any significant differences. And actually, I think we had much higher, they had a higher yield there too, or in pounds per acre. So in this case, I would lean towards maybe the 150 acre. It seems like it might have been higher in 2021, but we can't say for sure. And it was the best performer in 2017 and 2018. So maybe some evidence there. The other thing about this, though, is that there is potential for this to fix nitrogen by itself. So in an inoculated soil, you might be able to rely on this to actually fix nitrogen for you because it's a legume. And we already discussed the disease pressure there. And then bitter melon, this is the fully ripened bitter melon opening up that Dr. Lee mentioned earlier. You can see it's got these red seeds inside, and they're actually sweet at this stage. But it's, this isn't something you could reliably harvest in the field and transfer because it's super perishable at this point. But it is nice if you're a home grower. You can let it grow all the way out and taste the seeds for yourself. They're pretty good. Once again, Mohammed saw this really strong effect in 2018. 2021, 150 at some harvest dates. It was out, it was significantly better early in the season, but by the end of the season, the other rates actually kind of caught up enough that we didn't have a significant effect, but it seemed like the 150 rate did best here. And the reason we only have 2018 and 2021 is that both when Mohammed did the trial and when I did it, we had 1 year where the bitter melon failed to germinate adequately. And so we ended up going and doing them entirely in transplants, and that helped. But even the transplants, they had kind of lower germination rates. And I think actually Tainong is not selling this variety anymore. At least that's what they told me when I, ordered some more seed from them. I basically got some leftovers. So I don't know, maybe it's the old seed, but I kind of think that the variety itself might have had some germination issues or not very good seed vigor. So that's another thing to consider. This is definitely a crop. Like if you're trying to grow this variety, you would need to transplant it, I think. And that's another important thing to research before we give these crops over to growers, is make sure they're going to be suitable for direct seed or transplant. I should also mention the Luffa was transplanted in the 2020 and 21 trials, and it did perfectly fine. The long bean we always direct seeded. So yeah, on the long bean and bitter melon, it looks like we're leaning towards 150 pounds N per acre. Luffa had the best yield at 200 pounds per acre N, but it's not a super clear result for me. It would be nice if we had maybe a little bit larger scale trial, something a little bit more focused. Because one issue we had here is that we're growing all three of these crops adjacent to each other in a very similar system, and I don't know if that's necessarily, the optimal scenario to try and grow them. Might be good if we could specialize a little bit more, experiment more with, lower end rates on the long bean, for example, and higher on the Luffa, even maybe try a 250-pound rate on the Luffa to see if we get an even larger effect. But yeah, so we could benefit from some follow-up there. And if anyone has any questions.
Jonathan, stop sharing. And I have a question. Yes, what was the crop before the 2021 trial?
That was a fallow field, and they had basically just been growing pasture grass on it before.
And same thing with the other one, with the 2017?
I would assume so, based on the location they grew it. So that was at the Citra research station here close to UF, and most of that land is fallow when they're not doing an experiment on it, and they just let grass grow basically.
Yeah, so basically nothing there, but they usually use a cover crop such as wheat.
They didn't. Sometimes they do, but in this case, they didn't have. They might have had some wind. Yeah, actually, they might have had winter wheat before it, but yeah.
Well, that can contribute some soil organic matter in that, but do you recommend like in the same field 2 or 3 year, or are your growers do a rotation?
That's a good question. I would say in general, if you can rotate, it's probably better. But if you're growing, for example, we have 3 crops here. We could follow. Maybe you don't want to follow the bitter melon and the Luffa after each other because they're the same family. But you could go long bean and then Luffa or bitter melon, or a cover crop into. So one advantage of having like these more diverse crops is you've got more room for rotation, I would say.
Sure.
Yes, in Florida we need to rotate.
Any other questions?
So much limited pressure in Florida.
Oh, okay. Any other questions before we move to the next speaker from New Jersey? Okay.